I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
You know, as a guy said on Twitter today, I got bad news for everyone out there, folks, because we're all now in possession of information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
Yes, Matt. Well, it's Thursday, so that means we're serving up another episode of Blaze News Investigates. And with news like today, we had to go through and bring in Sean Davis. He's the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist. Sean, thanks so much for joining us, because we're not lacking for any news this week, this month, this year.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel like the past 2 weeks have been drinking through a fire hose with all of the declassifications and new blockbusters we've gotten.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And it looks like bad news for Hillary Clinton. There's an explosive declassified appendix to the 2023 Durham report. It was released today and exposes how Clinton personally, she went through and approved a plan that was proposed by Julian Smith, who was going to magnify the Russia hack scandal to hurt Trump. So take us through just what you have gone through with these documents and that you've seen today.
Yeah, so what was released today came out of Senator Chuck Grassley's office. It's a declassified annex, 20 or 25 pages, to the Durham report that came out a couple years ago. And it includes in it some evidence and information we haven't seen before. And the main takeaway to me from this new document was that our intel services, because of information they had intercepted from Russia, knew very early on in 2016, long before the whole Crossfire Hurricane thing was launched, our intel services were very well aware that the Clinton campaign had a plan to tie Trump to Russia, that one major purpose of the plan was to distract from Hillary's emails. And they knew all of this long before they ever launched their Crossfire Hurricane little escapade. And so it suggests to me a far more nefarious intent in what the FBI and CIA were up to than even we had previously assumed.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, I too am reeling like Mike Benz and others, everyone online just pouring over this sort of live today. It was interesting to me. It was like a group effort. But this letter where, you know, HRC approved Julia's idea about Trump and Russia hackers hampering U.S. elections. This should distract people from her own missing email, especially if the affair goes to the Olympic level. We're going to the Olympic level with or without trans people. The point is making the Russians play a U.S. domestic issue, and then, as he pointed out, and others pointed out, say something like a critical infrastructure threat. I mean, and this is all over the place. I mean, the exact phrases that they knew would help trigger and justify this, they're coming up with them in a sort of in real time as you watch this unfold. And really, this is just proving, you know, the work that you've done for years, others, Molly and others at the Federalist, and everywhere else have done for years. It's like Christmas because, to me, because all this stuff is coming out. It's, you know, it's not surprising, right? But it's there it is. So the first question I have is, why in the hell has it taken this many years for this information to come out?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is that until now, we actually didn't have people running these agencies, even in spite of Trump having been president, you know, from 2021 to the beginning of 2025. It wasn't until now that we actually had people in these positions who were interested in transparency. So back in, I think, September of 2020, heading into the election, we reported at the Federalist that Gina Haspel had been personally blocking the release of a lot of these documents. You'll recall that Haspel was Pompeo's pick to run the CIA when he moved over to state. Mm-hmm. We also reported that Haspel had been personally banking on Trump losing in order to keep a lot of these documents that Gabbard has declassified hidden. And so it's just, even given what we knew before 2 weeks ago, it's shocking how much even people in Trump's own administration during the first term were doing things to block transparency and accountability that the whole country needed to know, and that it took this extraordinary election of Trump in 2024 for him to finally get people in power who are actually interested more in transparency and rule of law than they were in covering the tracks of the corrupt people who had run the agencies before them.
Well, Sean, it's like we're playing the greatest hits right now, right? The memos come out and they expose how Clinton's and the DNC and why not just add George Soros and the Open Society Foundation, right? Like this is the names that everybody has known for so long, but now we're getting the documents that actually show, line by line. And we have the VP of the Open Society Foundation, Bernardo is his last name. So how do we go through and make sure that people are actually understanding what is coming out? Because it feels like right now there is a document dump day in and day out, and it's hard even for all of us to keep up with this news as it's breaking.
Yeah, so this document is actually a little complex. So what they have in it at the beginning, the latter half talks about the con job against Carter Page, but I'd say the first 15 to 20 pages are about a hack of the DNC and the Open Society Foundation, which is the Soros group. And it was, whether it was Russians or other hackers, I don't think we definitively know. But they were able to find what they said were emails referencing this Clinton plan to kind of rig the 2016 election by making all these Russian claims. And so a lot of this intel that's included in there is English translation of Russian discussion of emails which they had obtained. You read some of these emails and they're in English, and yet you'll have a translator's note, and you'll think that's a little odd. Why is that in there? And it's because a lot of this they were having to. It was an English email which was translated into Russian and then translated back into English. But the most interesting aspect about it is you have what appears to be contemporaneous evidence that lots and lots of people knew at the time, even within the Democrat elite circles, that Hillary Clinton was planning to run this little Russia op. And to me, what's interesting is not what Hillary Clinton did, because we know she hired and funded Christopher Steele. We know the whole thing arose out of Oppo research from the Clinton campaign. What I find most interesting is that the Russians knew what she was up to. Our intel knew what she was up to. Our intel knew that the Russians knew what she was up to, which had to mean that if you had a brain in your head at the time working for US intel, you would see that and you'd say, wow, this means the Russians knew what she was doing, which means they might have been able to manipulate what she was doing. They might have been able to use someone like Christopher Steele or Igor Danchenko, the primary subsource of the Steele dossier. They might have been able to use and manipulate those people to in turn manipulate our political process by knowing what Hillary was up to. And yet at no point did Brennan or Comey or Clapper ever take that into account as they launched their witch hunt against Donald Trump.
This is always, Sean, the puzzling thing to me. It always comes down to this twisted pretzel, right? And you look at it and go, wait a minute. Who was colluding with Russians again? Who was getting info from Russians again? The Clintons famously tens of millions of dollars from Russians. But here you have the Russian intelligence service knowing something that, the only people who didn't know, like you said, the Russians knew, our intelligence service knew that they knew, and of course the elite Democrats knew. The only people who didn't know were the American people. And that would make me think this all sounds like, what was that phrase again? Election interference. Election interference on all sides. I don't know how they get away with this thing with Russia. It's a very weird deal, and it's tied into, I think, I wonder what your opinion is here. I think it's tied into trying to play off a boomer, Cold War mindset of Russians as the bad guys. That's like in there. They think that that's like a tricky thing to do to make the Russians the bad guys. And then you combine that with the fact that all of this stuff has to be justified with, foreign governments in order to, jumpstart the intelligence community and give them a subterfuge to start spying on and interacting in domestic affairs. Is that accurate?
No, I think that's totally accurate. And it's fascinating to me. It's almost Kafka-esque that after, 10 years of us hearing Russia interfered, it actually is true that one of the presidential campaigns in 2016 was colluding with Russia to interfere with our election results. That campaign was Hillary Clinton. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was Hillary Clinton's campaign that funded Christopher Steele to do all this nonsense. Now, you might say, well, Christopher Steele he was just a former British spy. That's true. He was also on the payroll of Oleg Deripaska, a sanctioned Russian oligarch at the time he was doing all this.
Yes.
Oleg Deripaska was trying to get DOJ and state to let him into the U.S. Oleg Deripaska was using Christopher Steele to get to Bruce Orr, who was at DOJ at the time, to help him out. And I'll remind your audience, who was Bruce Orr? That was the husband of Nellie Orr, the Fusion GPS researcher who was helping to put together this dossier. So from top to bottom, there was a 2016 presidential campaign colluding with Russia the whole time, knowingly, to interfere with our election. And it was the campaign of Hillary Clinton.
Well, wouldn't it be a shame if somebody named Barack Obama actually helped cover it all up? Oh, wait, we got that today, too. There's so much that has happened. There was a memo that came out that said Obama sanctioned the use of all of the administrative levers to minimize the fallout of the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. It went on to say that from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the FBI does not possess any kind of direct evidence against Clinton because of the timely deletion from the email servers. Help break this one down, Sean.
Yeah, so I think it's important in there. What you're seeing in that excerpt is a Russian interpretation of what's going on in American political affairs. And so, I have a very hard time. It's hard enough understanding your own country's politics, let alone that of a country where you don't know anyone and you don't even speak the language. So that was the Russian interpretation of what was going on based on maybe it was hacking, maybe it was spying, maybe it was just their general political intel. But you brought up Barack Obama. Barack's got an interesting conundrum right now because he was president when this all happened. He allowed it to happen. He's the one who ordered the ICA. He's the one who kind of helped hatch this plan in the Oval Office on January 5th, 2017, to hold information back from Trump to go after Mike Flynn. He's at a crossroads now, and he can kind of do one of two things. He can go down the Colonel Jessup route from A Few Good Men. You're darn right I ordered the code red. I did it. I knew what I was doing. It had to be done. You need me on that wall. In which case, he becomes immediately culpable and liable and potentially puts himself in legal jeopardy for everything that happened. The other avenue he can go down is to say, I told my underlings, I told these intel chiefs, they needed to get the right intel. They needed to give me the facts so that I could make decisions on what to do. How was I to know that they were going to cook the books? How was I to know that they would lie to me about what they knew? How was I to know that they were going to defraud a FISA court to spy on my political opponent? If anyone's a victim here, it's me, Barack Obama, because my own people defrauded me and lied to me. And that's the real problem that I think Comey and Clapper and Brennan and all the other underlings have right now, is they have the possibility to end up twisting in the wind if Barack Obama at some points decides it's too hot and he needs to cut him loose.